Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. So today what I wanted to talk about has to do with how we buy video games, where we buy video games, and when we buy them. Because I feel it's important as consumers that we understand how our purchases affect us individually, but also more importantly affect the game industry as a whole and the kind of surrounding economy of it. So to start off with, I want to define some terms so that you kind of know where I'm coming from and I can better kind of explain this to you. So, start off with, let's talk about where, our, I should say, um, let's talk about when we buy our video games. So you may be thinking, well, don't you just basically go out and buy a video game? Well, yes and no. Broadly speaking, there may be more than this, but I've seen four main types that most people are going to encounter. Um, so the first being is buying a game on release. Um, say a game gets released on December the 5th. You go out anytime after December the 5th. You can either go to a retail store or go online. Doesn't matter where you go, but you can, as soon as the game hits its release date, you can buy the game and install it, download it, what have you. So this is the primary way that most companies, send their games out to people in terms of when you buy them. And in terms of you as a consumer, there's no real drawbacks to doing it this way. You go out, you buy it, you play your game, and if it was a good game, you praise it, and if it was a bad game, you're just like, oh well, too bad. I should have done my research beforehand. Um, the other three have to do with buying the game earlier than its release date. Um, the primary, the first one is going to be what we call pre-ordering. So what pre-ordering is a game, in most cases, a game has been in production. It's essentially finished at this point, and you're just waiting for the release date. You might be able to pre-order, let's go back to our same game that's coming out on December the 5th. You might be able to pre-order it. Maybe you could have pre-ordered it back in September or earlier. And so you're thinking, okay, so basically you're just buying the game earlier, and then you just get it when it comes out, right? Essentially, yes, but there's some unique issues that come along with this as well. So when you pre-order a game, um, you do not know anything about the game other than what the company has marketed to you, the advertisements, the campaigns, the social media drives, things of that nature. So all all you have to determine if this is a good game or not is the company's reputation and the marketing. And this is kind of hazardous for you as a consumer because you're buying a game solely on a promise. Um, I've always felt it's important that you should read reviews, critiques, analysis of any new game you want to buy. You should download a demo and play through the game and see that it is something that you want. Pre-ordering creates this atmosphere of, we promise this will be a good game, but there have been many instances where that's just not true. Launches can be entirely uh, horrible. I remember I was one of the fortunate few when Arkham Knight came out that the game didn't crash or I didn't fall through the floor or something like that. Um, but for so many, it got so bad they had to pull it from the Steam store and offer refunds to people because the game was literally broken on launch and they couldn't do anything. It took them several months to fix those problems. Um, and also, and that's an example of a company actually um, being good to their buyers and being like, "Hey, we screwed up, guys. Let's fix this." Um, but there's been a lot of times where games are broken on launch, don't might not be broken in general, but don't run on your own system, and um, if the if there isn't an adequate sort of refund policy in place, you're just stuck with a lemon and there's nothing you can do about it. You bought something because the company said it would be awesome. You know, No Man's Sky is a recent example. I mean, was it a bad game per se? No. But you bought that because they sold you something it wasn't. And that's dangerous for you as the consumer because if you buy something and then um, uh, it's for example if in any other thing for example if you were to um, say you went to a Walmart or something and you bought a blender and on the outside it said the casing would be green and you open it up and you find out it's purple. Well, you didn't want the purple one, so you just take it back and exchange it. Video games don't really work like that in general. I mean, the game wasn't wrong. You just thought it was something that it wasn't, and now you're stuck with something that you don't want. So that's why I think pre-ordering as a consumer is hazardous for you. So I would strongly discourage people in general from pre-ordering, and just know that. And I'm not. I just want to be clear that I'm just like anyone else. I've pre-ordered plenty of games, but just be aware that when you do pre-order, that there's that inherent risk involved. Um, so the next couple pieces of the puzzle um, are going to be um, what we call early access and crowdfunding. So early access is uh, is interesting because it's kind of like pre-ordering, but worse in some ways. Um, so the idea behind early access is, in the past, it's what we would have generally what game companies would do is once a game is nearing its point of finishing, they go through several testing phases. The first kind of stage of that is what they call alpha testing. Alpha testing is a game um, is essentially in a state where all of the mechanisms in the game aren't even there yet, and obviously the content isn't there either. Um, and then the next stage of it are beta tests. So what beta tests are is the game is what we call feature complete. Everything in the game, it may still be glitchy and buggy in places, but everything in the game works like it's supposed to and runs like it's supposed to, essentially. But they may still need to add levels, they may still need to add art assets, music, what have you. So and in general, what companies would do is they would hire people, or they would to beta test and alpha test for them, or they would encourage people to sign up to their mailing lists and send out beta keys to people so they can download it, test them, and most importantly, send feedback to the company. Cool. And generally speaking, people were either paid for this or they did it for free because they thought it'd be interesting to test this new game. So, So how does early access relate to this? Well, early access is essentially where you pre-order a game and you gain access to the alphas and betas of the game. You're essentially, the game is in development when you buy it. And once the game is complete, they will uh, they will do, whatever final update for it, and it'll go gold or go live, whatever terminology you want to use. And the game is now a release version of it. So um, this is a little problematic. Uh, Broadly speaking, there are two distributors that do this kind of form of early access where you can buy games. Obviously, there's Steam, which calls its service early access. And then you have GOG.com, which has a service that they call in development. I want to tell you a little bit about both services so you understand how they work, because they do work differently. Um, so the way Steam's work is you essentially, you basically buy the game, and generally speaking, it's at a discount. It might be $40 on launch, but you can get in on early access for, let's say, $20 or what have you. Sometimes it's full price. But the thing you have to be aware of is when you buy a game, and especially in Steam's early access, is that the game may never be finished. The game is, because a lot of these, especially smaller developers, will send a game into early development so they can get the funds they need to finish the game. Well, that's problematic, because if the game doesn't garner enough interest and people have paid into it, but they still haven't gotten the funding they need to finish their project, it'll just die and the game will never be finished. And they'll just shutter the project and say, well, that's too bad. Um, so um, that to me is kind of strange, as wanting to buy something that could potentially not be finished ever. Especially if it's from an unknown company. I mean, there's been so many different stories of companies that just, disappeared into darkness and then reappeared as something else, a month later under a different name. So there's definitely a lot of sketchy things going on there. So I would say, if you do want to get involved in early access, get involved with a company that you know of, or that has a good reputation based on its developer and what have you. And just knowing that if you want to support some new indie developer, the project could implode and your money's just gone. Um, so the other service distributor that offers this service is going to be GOG. Theirs is a little different, because Steam basically just lets whatever out into the wild, and they don't really have any sort of vetting process. It's basically, I think you pay like $100, and as long as you have a video or even just some screenshots, you can upload whatever, and all the checking they do is, does the game run is the sort of uh, does the executable open something, is more what they mean by run. And so with GOG, they have a much more thorough vetting process, in that games that are well on their way to being completed and are actively being worked on and things like that. And they have certain, I'd have to double check what their criteria are, but they do have like benchmarks and things. Be like, you have to have this much completed and be working on the game in a certain sort of fashion to be part of the in development program. Also, in development is different in that, if anytime you can basically opt out of it, you can be like, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I want my money back. They'll basically refund it to you, no questions asked, because you are paying for the privilege to beta test their game. So they have decided that as a business model, they want to. Um, make sure people have the ability to get their money back if they want to. So, so in general terms, early access, um, just be aware if um, Steam has a much larger library of things that you can check out, but their service is also very unregulated. Um, and GOG has by the same term has a smaller catalog, but you can actually get your money back if things look like they're going south. All right, and lastly is what we would call crowdfunding. This is this is actually kind of a thing unto itself. If you're not familiar with the idea of crowdfunding, there are a couple major sites like Indiegogo and Kickstarter, where you can basically somebody will post a project that they're working on. And in the case of a video game, they'll post concept art and alpha screenshots, and the developer will make a video telling you what the game's about, and there'll be a short description of it, or even a long description depending on the size of the project. Um, and what you do is, as a funder of the project, is you pick, there are going to be different, basically reward tiers. And like, I think this project is cool and I want to fund it. Say there's some beautiful new retro platformer that looks promising to you and you want to put money into it. So let's say they have like a $20 reward tier. And at that reward tier, whenever the game is finished, they will send you a key where you can you can download from GOG or Steam or wherever they decide. Most of them go with one of those two services, since they're the two biggest at the moment. Um, but once the project is finished, you get a copy of the game. So, um, and at higher reward tiers, they'll also offer like physical rewards and access to alphas and betas and so on and so forth. Uh, Generally speaking, you'll get like your names in the credits, and stuff like that. So, um, what's different than this, from like pre-ordering and early access, is that you're not um, buying a game as such. You're saying, I like this concept and I think your company is interesting and that you have a group of people that can do what you say you're going to do, and I want to support this effort. So instead of purchasing a game, what you're saying is, I'm going to fund this project. And if your project succeeds, you, because you're an honest person, are going to in turn, um, you know, give me the reward you promised. Um, Also, there are some now there's some legal concerns involved with that. If a project finishes and they don't give the rewards they said they were going to, people have started taking different companies to court over that. So um, it's still a kind of legal gray area. So just be aware that if a project doesn't um, finish. One, it didn't finish. I mean, sometimes if you put money into a project and it fails, it failed. It's not like they can give your money back. Um, if you gave a company $100,000 and they put it into salaries and computers and software licenses and what have you, and composers, the money's gone for the most part, and they can't give it back. So just be aware that when you crowdfund, the money is gone as soon as you send it to them, more or less. If the project goes on the skids and they find that they're in a position where they can't do it, some companies will try and refund you at least part of your money. But again, just assume that anything you give to these people is essentially a gift of sorts. You are wanting to help this project and get it towards where it wants to be. So in so I guess my kind of Whereas I tend to discourage pre-ordering, but I think crowdfunding is okay. I think they're fundamentally different because with a pre-order is a project has already been finished and you're buying the game. Whereas with crowdfunding, the project hasn't even started, or it's in like its earliest stages, and you want the project to go forward. They're literally coming to you as they're cutting out the investment kind of middleman almost, or a lot of these like mid-tier developers like Obsidian, In Exile, a few others. Basically, what they were doing is they're saying just like, we want to work on this game and we don't want to have a publisher hanging over us telling us what we need this game to be. So they crowdfunded things like that so that they could kind of cut out that publisher middleman. So with crowdfunding, the difference in it lies in the fact that you are you're not buying, you are buying an idea, and then when and if the game is finished, they reward your investment, rather their gift to the project, with a copy of the game. If you know gave them at that appropriate tier or what have you. So that's pretty much when we buy games. So, and for the last part of this video, I want to talk a little bit about um, where we buy our games, who we buy them from. And broadly speaking, there's a few things here that ways you can approach this. There is the standard model of whether you're talking brick and mortar or digital, is the retailer. This is, you go to a store, you find the product that you want, and you buy it. Whether it's Walmart or GameStop or Steam or Direct to Drive or Humble Bundle or whatever. Well, Humble Bundle isn't a retailer; it's actually a charity. So I apologize. That's not correct in this case. But they do have their own store. Humble Bundle's weird. It's kind of its own entity. I might even make a video just on Humble Bundle and the Humble Store to kind of explain what in the world that thing is. But anyhow, what I was saying is retailers, the way the general model works is once a game is finished, a company will go to a retailer and they will sell the game to them at a certain, it's usually a percentage of what the actual retail price is. I want to say it's like 60% in general, 60 to 70% of what they sell at retail for. So if it costs $60 retail, they'll sell it for like 40 to the retailer, and then the retailer marks it up so they can make their profit. So this is fairly straightforward for the most part. Is in general, you go to a retailer that you like and you trust and you appreciate their business practices, and you buy it from them. That's just how retail works. The next being buying directly from the publisher or even the developer if there's no publisher. And that usually is a case of you go to their website and you be like, hey, I want to buy this game. And you buy it from them and bam, you're done. And they'll either, send you a download link, or they'll give you a key for the game so that you can download it from one of the digital distributors, and what have you. And that's a little different in the sense that the reason companies will generally use retailers is they can hit a broader market of people, but it also costs them a certain amount of money to do that. Whereas if you buy a game direct, you can if you buy a game direct, the money all goes to the company that you buy it from. So pretty much that's how you will buy things in general, um, in terms of buying the game new. Um, the next part of that puzzle is the used game market and also key resellers. So used games, broadly speaking, um, is a pretty simple concept. Whether you're using GameStop, like a official retailer that sells used games, like GameStop, or something like eBay or Amazon that lets you post stuff and they sell it on your behalf, and take a portion of the money and what have you. Um, the used games are kind of weird in that they're friendly to the individual consumer, but they're not helpful to the industry as a whole. What do I mean by that? Well, say for example, you go to a GameStop, and you buy. Say you want to get Call of Duty Infinite Warfare for Xbox or PS3. I don't know if it's an exclusive, but the point, regardless. Let's say you're buying it on Xbox, and you're a GameStop member and you've got points and whatnot. So normally it would cost you $60, but you can buy a used copy for 45, we'll say. Guess what? How much of that money goes to the publisher or the developer? None of it. You have paid $45 to GameStop for a cheaper game. Again, is that bad? Not necessarily, but you have to realize that if you have to be aware of what you're doing, is my important point here. Is like I buy stuff from GameStop all the time, um, but just being aware that if I buy things from GameStop, if it's used, publisher's not getting any money. Just just that's the long and short of it. And you may be thinking, well, that's not really a big deal, is it? I mean, I have a limited amount of money and I should buy things that are cheaper to make my money go further. Yes. I as a general rule, you want to buy things on sale and not buy them at full price. That's just good sense in term as a consumer. Um, the problem with a pure a reseller like GameStop or eBay or something like that, in terms of the health of the game industry, is it promotes. It doesn't promote the health of the game industry per se. It promotes the health of the reseller. So um, I'd have to look at the numbers, but the the idea being is for every game that's um, if say 100 people were to buy the game new, and let's say half of them sold their game back to GameStop, and then all of those games got sold again. So GameStop, in essence, sold 150 games, but the publisher only got paid for uh, the 100 full-priced retail ones that they originally sold to them. Um, so, you know, um, just I want everyone to be aware that this can, over time, this could have um, problems in terms of how well companies do, because if they're it's also GameStop is one of those funny animals where, in addition to being a reseller, they're also one of the reasons why games cost so much on digital stores. You'd be like, wait a minute, what do they have to do with the price of digital games? Well, with a lot of big name titles in the past, what they've done is they've essentially said, look, they've straight up gone to different big name companies and like, okay, here's how this works. Um, you're going to keep your digital games at the same price, uh, or we won't stock your game in our store. And that's very, for anyone that's selling in retail, having somebody like GameStop tell them, no, we're not going to stock your game is very hazardous for them. So, um, that's part of the reason why digital games cost as much as they do, because in theory, digital games should always be cheaper than retail games because you're not having to manufacture a physical game and having to sell it to a retailer. So just be aware of that. So um, so that's pretty much all I have as far as how we buy video games. So I appreciate you coming back again, and um, if you have any questions or concerns, just hit me up in the comments below. You can find me pretty much anywhere on social media as MonkeeBoom, two E's, no Y. And you guys have a great day. Enjoy.